After leaving Minx and Bottom Dollar Publications, Joyce tries to build an independent career in the ninth and 10th episodes of HBO Max's comedy series Minx. After the appearance in the Dick Cavett Show, Joyce stays back in New York with her former colleague Maggie. She fails to get along with Maggie and her acquaintances and ultimately returns to Los Angeles, only to get welcomed by violent protests and lawsuits against her magazine. The first season of the show ends with significant developments that rewrite the fate of Minx and Joyce. On that note, let us share our thoughts regarding the same. The ninth episode of the show, titled A Scintillating Conversation About a Lethal Pesticide, begins with Shelley and her husband Lenny trying to improve their sex life, only to fail. Joyce goes to the office of Betsy, a famed magazine, to see her friend Maggie, who works for the same. Maggie's boss asks Joyce to write a feature about Minx and Betsy. Maggie hosts a dinner party for Joyce and a few of her colleagues. They display their superiority complex by making fun of Joyce's former colleagues at Bottom Dollar. Offended, Joyce leaves the party abruptly upon making an excuse and goes to a pub with a stranger. Back at Bottom Dollar, Doug conducts the photo shoot of Billy Brunson without any regard for Minx's style and purpose. Bambi disapproves of using photographs that do not align with Minx. She leaves Doug and Bottom Dollar when she realizes that her voice isn't heard. Shelley goes to meet Bambi after having a dispiriting time with Lenny. They eventually start to be intimate. Doug considers Wendy Ma as Joyce's replacement and strikes a deal with her in principle. When Doug demands Richie to take Brunson's photographs, irrespective of his disapproval, the photographer also quits Bottom Dollar. The 10th episode of the show, titled You Happened to Me, begins with Willie's wife hurting his penis in retaliation for his domestic abuse. Joyce returns to law and confronts Doug for using Brunson's photographs for Minx's next issue. Willie files a lawsuit against Doug and Joyce for inciting his wife to harm him through an article that appeared in Minx. He asks men around him to protest against Minx and Bottom Dollar for publishing materials that devalue their gender's supremacy and propagating rebellious and unacceptable notions of feminism. Councilwoman Bridget Westbury teams up with Willie and reveals that she is trying to ban pornography in the San Fernando Valley. Do Minx and Bottom Dollar Publications shut down? When Willie's wife Wanda reacts against his masculine authority over her, he realizes that Joyce's Minx isn't just an ignorable intellectual publication. He gets scared upon understanding that women are reading the magazine to realize their rights and value to retaliate against imposing men. As a misogynist, a society where women awaken to stand against men is nothing but horrifying for him. Thus, he proclaims the need for men to end the influence of Minx. Willie's attempts to incite men to protest against Minx and Bottom Dollar even produce results as Doug gets forced to close down his office building temporarily. Even though Minx and Bottom Dollar aren't shut down yet, Doug is facing severe challenges to resume the operation of his empire. Lawsuits get filed against him and his company one after the other. Since his financial condition doesn't allow him to settle them down out of court, Doug is drowning. In addition, Westbury's efforts to ban porn in the valley and her silence toward violent protesters destroying his property are expected to worsen the predicament for Doug. Since his lawyer decides against using Westbury's secret to blackmail her, he doesn't have any clear-cut direction in front of him to reopen his publishing house. However, Doug and Joyce may not see the absolute end of Minx or Bottom Dollar Publications soon. As always, we can expect Doug to come up with innovative ideas to save his company and move forward with his ambitions. Even if he has to make adjustments to the content he creates, Doug is expected to make changes that satisfy and align with the readership trends. He may find a way to cope with Westbury's opposition illegally, even if it means exposing her unrevealed secret. Why does Doug give away Minx to Joyce? When protesters start to destroy Bottom Dollar's office, Doug, Tina, Joyce, Bambi, and Richie hide in a secret room. To divert themselves from the violence that unfolds in front of them, Bambi and Joyce start to read readers' mail and get astounded to know that their readers admire them. From the letters, they realize that Minx has inspired women to take a stand against their abusive husbands and overbearing men in their lives. Joyce even comes to know that a baby was named after her to appreciate her effort to release Minx. Doug, who listens to Joyce and Bambi reading these letters, realizes that Joyce has touched the hearts of his readers through Minx. From Minx's inception, the magazine has been nothing but a product to sell for Doug. He doesn't have any emotional connection to Minx other than the stunning sales numbers it produces. When Joyce leaves Minx and Bottom Dollar, he seeks someone to fill her shoes for him to sell the magazine. However, after listening to the letters, Doug realizes that Minx is Joyce's child, and nobody can put their heart and soul into it as she did. His readers' letters make him realize that Joyce's hard work and sacrifice are the foundations of Minx's success. When Joyce makes it clear that she isn't returning to Bottom Dollar Publications, Doug understands that there isn't anyone who can replace her to run Minx. An irrefutable paycheck may help him appoint Wendy to run the magazine, but it cannot recreate Joyce's unparalleled ambition to connect with every reader through her creation. Thus, Doug gives away Minx to Joyce upon realizing that it is futile to work on the magazine without the one who gave birth to it. Minx has touched hearts through Joyce, and Doug respects that enough to step away from her dream project. Why doesn't Joyce return to Bottom Dollar Publications? Will Doug and Joyce work together again? When Doug welcomes Joyce back to Bottom Dollar Publications, she rejects the offer without even considering it for a moment. Joyce has worked and offered to work for numerous men in her life. Almost every one of them has utilized her ideas and intelligence to their advantage while exerting their authority over her. Whether it be her former boss at New York Magazine or Doug at Bottom Dollar, men have displayed their power to Joyce without respecting her in several instances. She knows that going back to Bottom Dollar will only pave the way for Doug to control her again. Thus, she decides against returning to Doug and his company. Joyce doesn't want to get controlled anymore. She has earned the admiration of her readers enough to independently establish her voice and expression without a man to tell her what she should do. Joyce doesn't want her voice to be unheard or rejected because it doesn't align with the economics of her employer. Even if it's a woman, another authoritarian figure to control her vision and creativity is unbearable for Joyce. Since Doug steps away from Minx, she can finally be independent as a woman and a publisher. However, that may not necessarily mean that she will never associate with Doug anymore. Joyce admires Doug's actions that helped her materialize her dream. While working independently for Minx, she may seek the assistance of Doug in non-creative or non-editorial affairs like printing, shipments, and sales. She may even consider working on Minx within Bottom Dollar in the future with complete editorial authority. If Doug ever accepts to publish Minx without interfering in Joyce's creative realm, a reunion is possible. You Happen to Me, episode 10 of Minx begins with Joyce catching a glimpse of the cover spread for Minx. She heads over to Doug's to hash out her concerns, but is taken aback when Tina answers. Joyce immediately realizes they're together, but quickly gets over this initial shock. Joyce expresses her concerns over how Minx is going to be perceived by their readers. The picture in question shows Billy standing while the women are posing as reindeers on all fours. The whole idea of these women being submissive isn't exactly going to mesh well with the empowering message at the heart of Minx magazine. Why is William Wilkerson suing Minx? Anyway, there are more problems for the Minx gang as they learn they're being sued by William Wilkerson. He claims their article about marital rape enticed a wife to use salsa to burn the man's penis. Any male watching this is likely to wince, especially given the opening segment to this chapter, and it's yet another obstacle standing in Minx's way. This act also entices a new pro-men movement called M.E.N. to act against the empowering women and take down Minx once and for all. Joyce also decides to take action, scooping up Bambi and Richie to her cause and writing out a handwritten cease and desist request to get rid of the third issue of Minx. After handing it over to Doug, they leave him with a lot to think about. An internal war is brewing, so Doug does his best to try and appease to Doug and Bambi's demands to tempt them over onto his side. Do Doug and Joyce convince Wanda? Meanwhile, Doug heads off to visit Wanda, the wife of William Wilkerson, to try and get her side of the story. Only, Joyce shows up soon after, and the pair end up butting heads over Wanda's motivations. Wanda speaks up though and decides she's going to speak her own truth without either of them present, pointing out that Minx's magazine did inspire her to take action, but she didn't mean to do anything really bad, she simply wanted to make a bit of a joke out of her husband. What happens with the M.E.N protest? Why are they so angry? Bridget heads on the radio and decides she's going to try and enact a new law to stop the distribution of pornography. When the M.E.N head outside the Minx office and begin chanting and marching, Bambi tries to reach them. She speaks calmly but unfortunately in mentioning that she's no longer doing nude modeling. The men are enraged and storm into the building. Joyce and the gang hide in one of the offices, where they scramble to phone the police. Unfortunately, the cops are under Bridget's instructions not to arrive, so it seems like they're on their own. Bottom Dollar is completely trashed, while the main team sit and go through the fan letters. When an effigy is burned in the main atrium, they call in the Russians to sort these men out. There's a nice little montage here that ensues after, as the guys manage to get out. Shelley shows her photos to her husband, while Tina ends up receiving a letter of acceptance from multiple different colleges. How does Minx end? Off the back of this, and safe from the angry swarm of M.E.N, Doug tries to encourage Joyce to go back to being partners. Joyce isn't so sure and admits she's not particularly interested in giving away her power. Doug eventually makes a leap of faith and decides just to give Joyce Minx magazine. Doug doesn't want to lose her and compromises, telling her he can't wait to see what she does with the magazine. Good luck, he says, leaving Joyce with a big decision to make. So Minx bows out with a sequel bait ending that leaves the door wide open for season 2. Now, at the time of writing, HBO haven't actually renewed this one, but given the decent viewing figures and the empowering message, it won't be surprising if they do greenlight this one. In the meantime though, the finale does well to finally show that Joyce is not compromising on her vision, but also recognizes that Minx is her baby, and doesn't really want to give up control to someone with an alternate vision. Likewise, Doug realizes that he's going to lose Joyce, a key part of Minx's success, unless he actually allows her creative control. This essentially forms the foundation of this conflict, and it's a nice way to round out their characters to see Doug compromising and trusting Joyce to do what's right. There's also some nice work done with Shelley too, while Bambi's character is probably the most rounded here, as she decides against doing any more modeling, which is a great touch. Hopefully this one will be renewed for a second season though, as Minx certainly has enough in the tank to go for round 2.